Welcome back to the third hour of our lecture, and we continue from there as we have been talking about the biblical intention of our definitions, also baptism. We also talk about the rites and the interaction within which such interactions are made. It is right for us to look at it in a different way. So we might not spend much time on this topic because of schedule is going far, and then I'll talk about that at the end of the class when we come to the end of our schedule for the remaining 13, 14, and 15 weeks. Okay, this is the 12 weeks as we said, and we are working towards the end of it. So the statement we were dealing with was the issue of the baptism of interaction. And I talk about many groups use and impose the form as if it were handed over to them. Now, when it comes to the aspect of culture, now a church form a culture based on their own initiatives, coupling with the scripture, and it becomes so demanding that without being following that, it becomes difficult. And because it becomes difficult, people mean the culture to become as if without it in the church cannot stand. I know there are things in the church that we must be able to stretch it vividly and clear in order to have the sanity of the church and maintain the purity and also the holiness of our church. There are certain things where you cannot do without them. In some cultural aspect of the church, like the Bible says, women should cover their hair. And then the Bible also talks about people who cut their hair as a woman should be able to tie it and cover it. But people with the long hair, they already have covered their hair. But in older churches, you go, for instance, in my church, women, even though you have a wig or whatever, you must use some hair tie or some scarf to cover yourself as you go inside the church. But because of technology, because of exposure, people think we don't need those things. And those things are not taking us to heaven. But there are ways in which we function and also guide us towards being fair in our stages of life as Christian. But we need to understand what it takes when it comes to the reality of a culture and its implication. Many groups use it, I said. Many, if not all, they use it, and many don't even use that in their own lifestyle. It is then used within the language largely for the purpose of joining, not that, and also the purpose of making you part and parcel of a full membership of a group or a church. Now, it should mean these things plus the open commitment of the initiate to allegiance both to God through Christ and to that specific group of Christians. Water baptism frequently does signifies just such meanings. Other meanings are often present as well, okay? Either in addition to or in place of these more ideal meaning. The fact that the rituals is a foreign one, borrowed from another culture, unknown in America, Western American, Eastern culture outside the church. The label by a Greek word that has never been translated, baptizo, baptize, affects its meaning at both general and individual level. It very easily come to mean a sacred, even magical, rituals that one goes through only because it is required by God and an anti-church organization. When such a meaning becomes prominent, it results in a great contrast between the way in which baptism is perceived today and the way it was perceived in the New Testament, and also how it is being practiced in different denominations today. For in the first century, water initiate rites were used to induce or induct people into a number of different groups. Among these were Judaism for proselyte and the Greek mystery religions, as well as the church. The functions and the purpose of baptism were well known to those outside as well as to those inside these groups. Perceptions of baptisms influenced by understanding of historical conflicts over the mode, the theological teaching concerning the practice, the attitude of the participants towards the church organizations and panel, etc., can also result in significant difference between how the form is seen today and how it was seen in the early church. Such factors greatly influence the meaning attached to a given cultural form. What is your own form of baptism? Okay? What is its form of baptism? Remember, we're dealing with culture. That culture is very important. Interacting with all this, the contributing markedly to the meaning of water baptism is the way the form is used by a group and individual that are sent or also that are part of it. Other groups, Society of Friends, Salvation Army, have become so upset with the constant using or arguing over water baptism that they have abandoned the use of the form somewhere between these extremes. We will return later to this model. The usage component of this model is incorporated into the next submodel 3E as the performance component of that model. Now that we have seen these kind of things, we want to talk precisely about more of the model of the culture that has been put into the water baptism. Many people could not be able to identify or differentiate it. Okay, so cultural pattern and cultural performance, model E, in page 69 downward and on. So let me take as for instance, Orthodox or majority people, the church, the Christian, and even people who are not Christian tend to be quite connected with this and also think that it's something that we need to look into as part of life. Anthropology, sociology, and also psychology do not go all the way with the determinists. However, narrowly one may be channeled by one's culture in any given areas of life, there is usually some rooms to wiggle. Okay? Some rooms to wiggle, whatever we think about it. Okay? Now, that is, even though it might not occur to a given individual or group within a given society, that a particular custom could alter the difference. They have the freedom to do so if they choose. If for some reason external or internal to their culture, they feel the need to alter that custom, they might choose to alter it and actually go about it for the rest of whatever they need to do. So the culture shape us, the cultural aspect of everything we do is to shape us rather than strictly channels our behavior most. I think by granted, it helps us to be what we are. It helps us to be what people see us to be. But to prove that, it determines our behavior one will have to demonstrate that culture in any or every situation allows no alternative. Okay, it is channel. It is done the way one would have to demonstrate that culture in any or every situation that allows no alternative. We need to understand this and to be able to function as it does to our own life. Whatever we do, the culture is telling us more about it. It will have to be proved that culture so tightly channels behavior that cultural causation is the only appropriate explanation. On the contrary, what we observe is that with respect to at least most, if not all, possible aspect of culture, okay, human beings are presented with more than a single possible choice of behavior. Okay? Single possible choice of a behavior. One's culture, rather than facing only a single response to given stimuli, ordinarily presents one with a culturally allowed or allowable selections of alternatives, one of which a person selects, usually as a matter of habit, matter of behavior, matter of way of life. So it's bounced back to us in our culture when our behavior differs from what we agree in order to function accurately in our society or community. Though we ordinarily operate nearly every aspect of our culture in an unthinking, habitual way, we might choose to operate any given aspect according to any cultural way. We might choose to operate any given aspect according to another culturally acceptable, though perhaps not preferred, but alternative. And that alternative prevails, and that alternative reveals, and that alternative gives us what we need to know, what we need to see, what we need to also function with. Okay? It is rather fortunate. But it helps in differentiating the culture of ours and the culture of others. I said earlier that culture is a communication because it gives us the differences between these people and that people. This is what we mean by culture. And I've taken you into the Christian culture to bring you back to the society in which we live for. As Christian, as pagans, and so-called religion, you can think there are different cultures in which we have to walk by it. But we should know that there are things that cannot be able to function if we tend not to go by the right way. What they minimize or ignore is the fact that they are allowed alternative which may be selected and habitually different by different human beings within the same group who are subject to the same cultural conditioning but respond to it differently. What am I saying? We come from the same place. Let's take for instance in Africa. You have a place where it has more than one different culture practice in the same vicinity. Okay? They have taken that as if it is part of their way of life. And so they become different in comparison with those same culture that they have been formed in one environment or area or vicinity. Okay? So that shows the differences where we are. Even though greed into which we are indoctrinated before we realize what is happening to us. This aspect of culture is sometimes referred to as the press of culture, according to Gillen in his book. What this patterning or press provides for the members of the culture is an extremely large number of rights or rules or boundaries with reference to which they must operate. It's simple, but that depends on how you pick it up, and that depends on how serious and important such culture is being used and organized. Okay, but when it's done, we should find the importance and the meaning at the same time. This is what Gillen said, and also this is what Goodman also added. But boundaries are not directives. Within the life aspect defined by his boundaries, our man is all liberal or all at liberty. It is within this space that he exists or exercise these faculties to which self-determination can be attributed. Moreover, the boundaries are potentially altered or potentially alterable in and within the vicinity we are. Fortuitous circumstances, meaning Jane Jones, who has grown up in a very different society and culture, or a conscious choice to spend his saving on traveling different society and culture. many significant expands his life course. Man's potential for mastering of his condition is, of course, limited, yet it is less limited the more he becomes aware, thoughtful, and confident of these or his own powers could be able to function in the right way. So, the use of, this use that a person makes of his culturally allowed life space will be here referring to as a cultural performance. We will get to that. Okay? Performance is what we do with, however, or how we use the room to wiggle, allow us by our culture. The part of social cultural experience is not based, is not passed down to us by a previous generation. We supply it as we make use of inherited cultural patterns and forms. In our use of the cultural pattern or patterning our performance, we both follow and alter the culture that we receive. The culture patterning that we pass on to the next generation, though it retains an extremely high degree of similarity to patterning that we receive, it's never exactly the same. And it will not be the same because it is not coming from the same angle. The stage is set for such change by the fact that the culture we receive consists the pattern adapted to the life experience of generations previous to ours, to the extent that the life experience of our generations approximate that of the previous generation. The pattern that serves them well will serve us well. Okay? To the extent that the experience of our generations differs, the pattern developed to serve their needs will be unsuitable to serve our needs maximally. Why? Because of different system and time being. With respect to language, neither speaks of grammatical patterning as arbitrary and fossilized. Present structures may have represented alternative choice some thousands of years ago, but they come to today's generation as arbitrary and convention in our lives. The lack of fit between such conventional patterning and contemporary problems stimulates desire for change most urgently in those parts of culture where lack of fit hurts the most. Language structuring, though clearly exemplify the problems, in generally not perceived as pinching people badly, but is perceived as process of destroying and making life difficult for many. It can thus often go for many generations without generating intense pressure for structural change. Dysfunctional patterns for obtaining food, however, are often the subject of rather strong pressure for change. Favor for change. Now, I think I rather stop here so that we can see to what we have in our own perspective of life. Friends and colleagues and my students, I'm glad that you enjoyed the lecture today. And also we have talked so much about this part, and then we also want to let you know that our discussion ends here, where the fact that cultural behavior is strictly channeled and originally operates habitually as impressed the determinist, and what the minimize or organize or ignore is the fact that they are allowed alternatives which may be selected, selected and habituated differently by different human beings within the same group. Like I said, we are on the 12 weeks, and so far our discussion has been at the moment at the cultural form patterns and also the process. So we still have hidden views journals, scripture and wealth. We also have human commonality. We also have God's attitude towards culture, part 1, and God's attitude towards culture, part 2, and the last one, which is supposed to be super cultural, meaning via cultural form. But so far, I'm going to join God's attitude and culture, part 1 and 2, in one lecture, if possible, because we have this is our 12 week. We also have 13 and 14. The 15 week is going to be an exam. Remember that I put an exam question during the midterm. If you forgot to write, I will remind you by next week where our final exam will be, so that you can remember and continue to write your assignment. May I use this opportunity and introduce and say to you, my students, some of you have not returned your papers yet to me as your tax. You only return to the school library server, but you need to send to my email. You need to check and read it slowly and be able to know what grade you can afford. Thank you for being part of this wonderful lecture, and for viewers outside, I'm glad that you are with us, and please stay tuned and continue. Not only lecture, but I have other things that are being posted on this video. God bless you and stay blessed during this pandemic. We shall see you again next week.